If you think the Osun crisis ended when President Bola Tinubu ordered the EFCC to lift the restriction on the state accounts, there is actually another layer to this story, because while the presidency says the intervention was about protecting the credibility of the election, Rufai and Dr. Abati see the intervention very differently. Then Atiku's camp weighed in and Governor Okpebholo entered the conversation with a completely different attack on Adeleke. And when you put all of these pieces together, the Osun story becomes much bigger than an EFCC account restriction. Let's connect the dots. The immediate issue started when the EFCC restricted the accounts of the Osun State Government while investigating the handling of the state funds. The timing became the biggest controversy because this happened very close to the Osun governorship election. The development triggered accusations that a federal institution was being used politically, something the EFCC and the federal government disputed. Then President Bola Tinubu stepped in, and according to the presidency, Tinubu called Governor Ademola Adeleke and informed him that he had directed the EFCC to lift the restriction, saying the timing of the action had created concerns about the credibility and integrity of the electoral process. But this is where the story gets interesting, because the intervention itself immediately created two very different interpretations. One, was this the president correcting a situation that had created unnecessary political tension? Two, did the intervention itself reveal just how much power the presidency has over institutions like the EFCC? Well, Rufai and Dr. Abati had very different answers. Rufai wasn't convinced that simply lifting the restriction erased the damage caused by the original decision. Listen to his arguments.
The supporters of the president today will say he has done a good thing. Yes, he stepped in. In fact, I saw Babafemi Ojodu wrote an article saying, yes, he has done a good thing, that this is the second time in this week they are going to pivot. Even the bishops matter, they pivoted and all of that. Yes. In fact, to answer your question in defense of the president this morning, you were asking, he could have used more discreet means. No, he didn't probably use the discreet means because he wanted to show that he was the one defending democracy, Yes, and all of that. But he just confirmed all we've always talked about. And he just confirmed the fact that the Nigerian president is so powerful, he's a monarch. No matter how you look at it, it confirms a lot this morning. And it goes back to talk about our institutions. I remind you exactly what happened when I was talking about blackmail yesterday. I don't use words loosely, because I know they speak big English. I understand English. When I was telling Wilson Owujare yesterday that you've already achieved the aim, even if the president reverses this, they've already achieved the aim. They've already blackmailed the state government. You thought I was joking? This is exactly what happened between James Comey and Hillary Clinton, leading up to the 2016 elections, the Comey investigations. By the time he had said the investigation was going on again, he had already blackmailed the candidates. So this reversal is a little too late, because you had already blackmailed the candidates. By you saying, okay, they should go ahead and pay the money, and they should unfreeze the account.
Just unfreeze him.
You have gone ahead to blackmail it because you have already put a toga of corruption around the candidate. It's what we call narrative building now. I've been doing this job for so many years. That's narrative building. If you go and search the search engine optimization around Osun State, you will see a freeze account and corruption allegations. Go and look at the SEO. So you've already achieved the aim. So the question is it that the EFCC did not have discretionary purpose? And that's why we say, for the sake of integrity, release the other states. Release the other states you're investigating. Because if EFCC has sweepingly mentioned many states they're investigating and the action they are taking to block the account, we will not cry foul politically. But you mentioned one particular state at a point in time. Then to now stretch it even further, when I was talking about rabbit hole, I don't use words loosely. When I was saying I led Wilson Owujare to a rabbit hole yesterday, a lot of people thought I don't know what I was saying. Dr. Abati, I put it to everybody. EFCC didn't freeze any Edo State accounts before the elections in Edo State, as it was asserted. I deliberately allowed that rabbit hole to continue. And you can please fact check me. So there was no precedence. If you wanted to argue precedence, there was no precedence to that effect. So obviously, there was something wrong in the ecosystem. And it goes back to confirm another point, that the EFCC has become political. Let's call it spade a spade. The EFCC has become political. And I'm happy you mentioned Betta Edu's case. Because since Alima came on TV here and broached up that matter, it's not been revisited. Has it been revisited? No. What about other matters like that? So, and we also see a pattern. Those that you are against the government, you get docked. Some other people, their sins are forgiven. Even if the case is pressed on, it drags on in the courts. So the presidency just confirmed other things. If I ask a question and they will say, Rufai, you started again. You are grandstanding. Can we also ask, how many of such orders has the president given to the EFCC? Both in the background and in the foreground. Because before orders can be given in the foreground, there's always an antecedence. If we want transparency in our democracy. So the president's supporters will say, he's a hero of democracy. It shows he can backtrack and everything. But this has now also opened the Pandora's box of many questions. So is it that the institutional discretion of the EFCC was so faulty? Is it that nobody in the EFCC sat down and told them the public affairs implication, the court of public opinion implication, the legal implication of what they were doing just before the election period? Is it that nobody told them? Is it that there's no second thought and an afterthought of the ecosystem and the aftermath of decisions being taken in the country? So it just confirms all we have always said. Institutions are at the mercy of the leader. And Ayo, in my last submission, I submit to you, that's why any Tom, Dick, and Harry, and any Tom, Dick, and Lagbaja wants to die to get the position of presidency in Nigeria, including Dr. Abati seated here. I lie? Because the position has immense powers. Even Ayo. Even me. Because the position has immense unchecked powers. And once one man has immense unchecked powers, democracy becomes a joke and a daylight aberration. That's the Nigerian story.
And this is where Rufai's argument goes beyond Osun. His concern isn't simply that the EFCC restricted the accounts and later reversed the decision. His bigger argument is that the original action has already created a political narrative around the Osun election. In other words, even if the restriction is removed today, the question of why it happened at that particular moment doesn't automatically disappear. He also raised a much bigger institutional question. If the president can intervene and direct the reversal of an EFCC action, what does that tell us about the actual independence of institutions that are supposed to operate independently? And Rufai even went further, asking the EFCC to show Nigerians whether similar investigations or restrictions are happening in other states, because if this is simply an anti-corruption investigation, the argument is that Nigerians should be able to see consistency. But there was another way of looking at the exact same presidential intervention. Dr. Reuben Abati considered Tinubu's decision a politically prudent move and described it as an act of statesmanship.
All right. Let me just isolate some of the issues with regard to the Osun matter. And I submit that the president has taken a very prudent, politically prudent decision, very responsive, and I think he has shown leadership, statesmanship, at a time when it mattered most. To the extent that by that singular action of saying the EFCC should withdraw the case it has in court, leading to the freezing of one account of belonging to Osun State Government, that will restore confidence in the political process in Osun State, to the extent that the president talked about timing. And that distinction is very important. He wasn't questioning the investigative powers of the EFCC. And in that regard, nobody can say EFCC has done anything illegal. It has the powers to investigate. But the timing that the president talked about has to do with enforcement of the outcome of his own investigation. And he said, look, the timing is very wrong because it could create the wrong impression. It could give the impression that the ruling party, being in opposition with the party in power in Osun State, may be trying to influence the process. So I think that the president's action, it's a case of the president himself acting as a circuit breaker and also establishing executive responsibility. Now, how do you say that? Some people, ADC, that, this raises question about the independence of the EFCC. Well, in terms of the investigation, nobody has evidence that, the president intervened in any way. The thing to also know is that the EFCC belongs to the executive arm of government. And within the purview of Section 5 of the 1999 Constitution, all those institutions, ministries, departments, and agencies, they exercise their powers as delegated authority. And the president, as a head of state, has a responsibility because the buck stops at his desk to make sure that when there is likely to be anything at all within government that is going to, heat up the polity, he has a responsibility as a man at whose desk the buck stops to step in and act as a circuit breaker that I refer to. So I do not see how this raises a question about the independence of INEC, EFCC. The president is not going to say EFCC investigation will be overruled. Now, after the election, if they still find cause to return to any other thing in terms of their investigation, the institution can still return to it. So that's that about that. And this EFCC, under the current chairman, because there's also the temptation to just make a blanket statement, has no reputation, has not been known to be frivolous. However, what you can ask for is that there should be an investigation. We need to know. Because one of the allegations by the Osun State Government, they specifically mentioned Minister Oyetola as the person who instigated, the tension. And Minister Oyetola has said, well, he's innocent. But can they investigate that? Is it true that somebody influenced EFCC? Is it possible for, an individual to authorize the EFCC? Those are questions that you can ask. Now, I go back to President Bola Tinubu. I think, it's instructive because when he was governor of Lagos State, he had a lot of issues with the federal government, particularly the Obasanjo administration, particularly in 2004, when the Lagos State government created 37 additional local councils. The federal government decided to freeze the account. They ended in court. And on December 10, 2004, the Supreme Court of Nigeria ruled that the federal government of Nigeria cannot freeze the account of any of the states or any part of the federation. So to that extent, President Tinubu's intervention will also seem to me like an act of redemption. However, in Osun State, I think it's important to say to all the players that they should play fair. They should realize that the interest of the people of Osun State is more important than any personal ambition. And that's why we've been calling for peace, fairness, a level playing field in Osun State. And I think that is very important. Because politics is not about balance of emotions. Politics is about balance of strategies. And let the players focus on their strategies, not on violence, not on politics of hate.
Can you see the difference between the two arguments? Rufai is looking at the intervention through the lens of institutional power and the damage that may have already been done. Abati is looking at it through the lens of political responsibility that the president saw a situation capable of damaging confidence in an election and stepped in to prevent it from getting worse. And that is important because both arguments are talking about the same event, but they are asking completely different questions. One is asking, how powerful should the president be? The other is asking, what should a president do when an action by a federal institution threatens confidence in an election? And that is where the Osun story becomes much more complicated. Then Atiku's camp entered the conversation, and rather than focusing on the fact that Tinubu ordered the restriction to be lifted, Atiku's camp raised concerns about the broader political implications of what happened. The argument essentially is that the controversy surrounding the EFCC action cannot simply disappear because the restriction has now been reversed. Because the bigger issue is what happened in the first place, why it happened when it did, and whether government institutions are being applied consistently across the political divide. And that brings us back to the question Rufai raised earlier about whether Nigerians are seeing a consistent standard. So now we have another layer to the story. The presidency says it intervened to protect the credibility of the electoral process. Rufai questions the implications of that intervention. Dr. Abati sees it as responsible leadership, and Atiku's camp is questioning the broader political implications. But Adeleke's own fight with EFCC didn't start with the president's phone call. Before Tinubu intervened, Governor Ademola Adeleke alongside the Osun State Attorney General and Accountant General had already taken the EFCC to court. The state filed a 2 billion naira damages suit challenging the restriction placed on its statutory allocation accounts. The argument from Adeleke's side was that the AFCC had unlawfully restricted the accounts and that due process had not been followed. So when Tinubu eventually intervened and ordered the restriction lifted, he wasn't stepping into an empty room. There was already a legal battle, a political argument, and a growing controversy surrounding the EFCC's action. Now you might be wondering, what does Governor Okpebholo have to do with all of this? Well, he brought another political dimension into the story. While discussing Adeleke, Okpebholo mocked the Osun governor's dancing style, saying,
Before somebody sign paper, he will dance. Are you not tired? For 4 years, this man has been dancing. Before he take breakfast, before he drink tea, he will dance. I was asking my friend, I said, I can't even remember when I saw this man in our general meeting in Abuja. Before he even entered the plane, he will dance. Before he get there, we are closed. So he won't know what we are saying. He doesn't know the reality of, if they bring money, chop that money from them, but don't vote for them. They say they have money to spend. Is that not so? Just collect the money, keep it in your pocket. That man is Obaseki's friend. You know we take Obaseki out of it, though. So we have to kick his friend out of this place too. I don't people chop Obaseki's money, but they never vote for him. But they kick him out. A government that is not working, the best gift for him is to send him out of that state. If it's not working, what business does he have here? Does he have any business?
But Rufai wasn't having it.
Maybe Governor Okpebholo is jealous that he cannot dance like Adeleke. So that's why he had the affectation with dancing. I'm not saying don't give political jabs. If in your statement you had said XYZ was not done, Adeleke did not meet this development quota, you stick to the issues, I would debate that. But if you are berating a man for dancing, we can put videos of Okpebholo to dancing now. Has he not tried to dance once or twice in a rally? Mm-hmm. So, but all of this is all political speak, so I don't really know, but I think it should be issue-based. But I think the most important thing we'd like to ask Okpebholo here is that, has he collected security clearance from Adeleke before he enters Adeleke's states? Because, you remember the case of Peter Obi, where he said, if anybody wants to come to my state, it's just only best for you to collect or to inform me so that I'll be able to provide security for you. He said it, these are his words, not mine. And at that point, some people defended him. So, I want to know, did he officially write to Adeleke or he sent a message to him that Adeleke, we are coming to campaign against you in your states? You know, because when people are talking and they try to justify their talk, they forget that there's a day that thing they said will come back to them. Life is like a boomerang. Mm-hmm. Thirdly, this cultural phenomenon of most governors going to campaign for their fellow governor in other states. All the political parties do it. So I'm not going to blame APC. PDP too did it in their days. Everybody do it. Then you leave your states, like the problems of your state are not pressing enough, and you go and sit in other states. If that video was made yesterday, I don't know if Okpebholo has returned to Edo State. He'll probably, maybe he went to campaign or he has returned. But when he gets to crunch time for the election, we'll almost see the governor, they're going to stay there. Mm-hmm. It's not necessary. Each state is a subnational on its own. I don't have problems with when you have a grand rally, all of you have a coalition. But going there individually and all of that, and leaving the people in your state, all of them do it. It's not only an APC thing. Mm-hmm. But most importantly, we would like to call again that with these Osun elections, Nigerians are watching.
Remember that controversy? Okpebholo had previously questioned Peter Obi's visit to Edo and said he couldn't guarantee his safety, arguing that Obi should have contacted him before coming into the state. So Rufai basically asked, if governors are going into other states to campaign for their political parties, where exactly does that argument lead? And now you can see why I said this story is bigger than the EFCC restriction, because we are no longer talking about one frozen account. We are talking about the EFCC, the Osun election, presidential intervention, questions about institutional independence, Atiku's response, a 2 billion naira lawsuit, and now governors attacking each other across state lines. And there's an interesting pattern here. Different people are looking at the same Osun crisis from completely different angles. For the presidency, it is about protecting electoral credibility. For Rufai, it is about institutional power and whether the damage had already been done. For Dr. Abati, it is about political responsibility and statesmanship. For Atiku's camp, it is about the wider political implications. And for Okpebholo, the conversation has moved into direct political attacks against Adeleke. So the real story isn't simply that the EFCC froze an account and the president later ordered it to be unfrozen. The real story is what that entire episode has revealed about the relationship between politics, federal institutions, elections, and the people controlling political power. And that is why I don't think this Osun story ends with the accounts being unfrozen, because the money may have been released, but the questions surrounding the decisions, the timing, the political reactions, and role of federal institutions are still very much alive. And now that Atiku, Rufai, Dr. Abati, and Governor Okpebholo have all entered the conversation, the story has taken a completely different direction. This is exactly why you shouldn't just follow the headline. Sometimes, the real story begins after the headline. If you want to understand what is actually going on behind these political stories, you already know where to find me. This is AskDami. Before you go watch this video, Make sure you like and you subscribe.